All right, welcome to the Countless Vlogcast, episode 36, actually. My guest author, John B. Rosenman. How are you, John?
I'm doing fine, Justin. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about yourself.
I'm a retired English professor. I taught for 40 years in historically black colleges and universities. I've published about 24 novels in the area of science fiction, fantasy, a little horror, a little paranormal, along with 250 to 300 short stories, also in those genres.
Okay, great. So you were telling me a little bit about, before we started, about your story. You said you worked at a historically black college, you were publishing novels. Tell us a little about that.
About which novels in particular?
Oh, yeah, the ones you published at the black college you worked at.
Okay. I published one novel called The Best Laugh Last, which was centered in a small black Southern college. I won't name it, although I called it Ashland. And it seemed to me that the institution, as well as the directors and the president, weren't taking into consideration the needs of the students well enough, that it was selfishly operated. And so I wrote an inside novel, and as I was writing it, I wondered if I might get into trouble. And after it was finished and it was accepted, I turned to my wife, Jane, and I said, could this get me in deep, you know what? And she said, you bet your butt. So I had to leave that school, and I went to a larger black institution. This one was a state institution, and the skeleton in my closet followed me there, rattled around for a while, but somehow I survived. And you will still find The Best Laugh Last in the archives of my collected works.
Okay, great. With that experience, did it make you want to write more about that, more the truth about the different things, or were you more hesitant to talk about that?
I was kind of hesitant. I'd had enough. At one point, I had to go in and see the president of, I won't name the university. And I was going, even though I had a rating of 100 for that year, times were tough and they were going to have to let me go. So I wanted to have a job, and I wanted to be gainfully employed without always looking over my shoulder. So I put that in the back burner. Maybe one day I'll return to it, but the lure of science fiction, speculative fiction, of impossible worlds, strange aliens is so tempting that it's lured me away, apparently for good.
So when did you start writing about the science fiction genre, and what inspired you to start that?
Oh, gee. I've been writing for a long, long time. Now, I know I look 25, but I'm actually 79. Actually 79. And so I have a little wear and tear on me. When I was a kid, I started scribbling stories in crayon, panels that way. And I got hooked by science fiction horror movies, if you know what I mean. The Thing, War of the Worlds, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I also read books by Ray Bradbury, The Martian Chronicles and so on, by Richard Matheson, EC Comics. All those combined grabbed me and pulled me in. And one experience in particular, I was watching the War of the Worlds when I was just turned 12. I don't know if you saw the original, 1953, when the cylinder starts to open and those three guys go there. And I said, oh, don't do that. I was so scared I wanted to run, but at the same time, I loved it. And it's been that way ever since.
So with your books, do you so you get inspired from these movies? So do you find you're writing similar plots with your books and these movies?
Do I what? Oh yeah. One of my novels, a mainstream book, was given to a publicist to promote. And as a matter of fact, do I have it here? I do. This is a young adult novel called The Merry-Go-Round Man. That's not me on the cover, by the way. But I love boxing and art. I wrote about my childhood, and I'm one of the characters, having passed through a sea change. All my novels I'd like to see, or many of them I'd like to see put on the screen. One of them is Beyond Those Distant Stars. This would make a one hell of a nail-biting space opera type of movie. But so far, the folks in Hollywood or wherever have been silent. I should mention one thing. You asked if I'd ever wanted to write about African American life. I did in my biggest, most ambitious novel, A Senseless Act of Beauty. Not a bad cover, is it?
No, it's not. It's great.
And there you have an African-like world, beautiful beyond compare. And the hero is Aaron Okonkwo, a biobotanist, and he finds that what happened in Africa with the colonial powers invading and taking it over is about to happen again. The title is A Senseless Act of Beauty, and he has to rediscover his Nigerian heritage to save this world against impossible odds. So I did get into it another time.
So when you're writing these, what's your process like? Do you do you go from like past experiences? Do you have like a blank sheet? Do you write with like music? What's like your process with the writing?
Well, on one hand, we have plotters, right? Another, we have pantsers. I'm a pantser. I tend to fly by the seat of my pants and make it up as I go along. So I don't write it out on sheets or anything like that. I tried it once. It didn't work too badly. That was for Speaker of the Shakk, but I find that's just not my method. And so it's a little bit like walking a tightrope, if you know what I mean. But it works best for me. I think of it often as being like somebody who's trying to reach a destination, and he's walking through a fog, and now and then he sees little snatches of where he's going. That's what my method is largely like. Inspiration on the spur of the moment.
So what's some of the feedback you get from your books, though? Like, what do people like take away from it, and versus what you want to take away from it?
Most of the reaction has been rather positive. I was in preparation for this interview. I was reviewing some of the reviews I received for Inspector of the Cross, which is the first novel in my Inspector of the Cross series. It's up through 6 books already. Yeah. And one reviewer compared me to Heinlein, Robert Heinlein, and that's pretty damn good company. Can I use the word damned? Well,
yeah,
I figured I could. That was a rhetorical question. Another one compared me not only to Heinlein, but to a combination of Heinlein and Orson Scott Card. Also wonderful. Usually they write a darn good read and so on, had me hooked. However, to be honest, I just read one review, very, very short, saying that he got 12 or 13% of the way through and he had enough. Thank you very much. So you can't please everybody. But usually the reaction to my novels is pretty good. Occasionally, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Finish. Sorry.
Well, I'm also a short story writer. As I mentioned, I've published close to 300 stories. And some of my stories I not only published once, I published 2 or 3 times. And the market for reprints is very lucrative if you're lucky enough to get an acceptance.
So when you're thinking of audience and writing a book, though, who do you like you target, like in terms of like age-wise, demographics, leadership, and compared to other different books, like as you grow as a writer and author?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Usually, I'm not acutely aware of just who. Am I writing for somebody like Justin Rich, who's a young African American, right?
Yeah.
Or am I aiming at adults? Usually I write what I want to write, but obviously when I write science fiction and fantasy, I've got to be rather acutely aware of what's been done and how to do it, because it's a vast library. So I'm aiming at fairly intelligent readers who are well-versed in science fiction. I don't try to write hard science fiction because I'm not a scientist, and that's not the natural way I go. I write what I'm interested in. Now, occasionally I write for young adults. The Merry-Go-Round Man, which I showed you, is about myself in a way, and two of my friends, two of my chums. So I do want those who are 11, 12, 13, 14, teens, young adults to be interested in it. At the same time, I want it also to grab and interest adults. But usually I write what I feel moved to write.
That's great. So who are some influences in terms of authors that you like inspired you growing up and compared to like now?
There are so many. Couldn't mention them all. Obviously, I mentioned before Ray Bradbury. The Old Strayed Man, have you read that?
I've heard of it.
The Martian Chronicles, Richard Matheson with The Incredible Shrinking Man. A lot of those golden age of science fiction and horror writers. More recently, it's been writers like, two I mentioned, have an African connection. One is Mike Resnick, who recently died. He wrote about one of his novels is about a futuristic space station of Kenya, and it's on a space station. And another is Octavia E. Butler, the first rather essentially successful commercially and creatively, critically, Black woman science fiction writer. And at Norfolk State University, I organized a conference on horror, science fiction, and fantasy, and I was successful in getting Octavia Butler to come and be the guest of honor. So Mike Resnick, Octavia Butler, Robert Silverberg, Dan Simmons, so many others. I read a lot of short fiction, and there are hundreds of writers who in one way or another have made me what I am.
That's great. That's great. So in terms of like your creativity now, what are some like your present goals in this like quarantine in terms of like your writership? Have you written more? Have you written less? Have you been like more inspired, less inspired?
Yeah, I was watching some of your interviews, and at least one author I saw had a little trouble adjusting. For me, I haven't had much trouble. I write usually at this particular desk, and I'm in connection with a lot of writers as well as editors online. So that experience continues. Now, I used to be a member of a writers group for 20 years, but that's long gone. But if this pandemic had occurred right now, well, we'd be meeting by Zoom, I assume. So it wouldn't affect me that much. I do belong to a tennis group of seniors, and I play about 3 times a week, so I'm active that way. So it really hasn't affected me. If I write something, I have a beta reader who's a remarkable woman, a retired colleague like myself, and we bat chapters back and forth online, and that's very productive. And when I submit work, well, it used to be that you'd write stories and you'd put them in envelopes and you lick the envelope. Remember that? And then you'd go to the post office and mail them. That's almost, today you just send it online, mail it out across the world.
Yeah, it's amazing though too. So like, how has it changed for you, like branding and promoting yourself too? Because you had a publisher too. Self-publishing wasn't like around like when you first began writing, was it? It wasn't like big, right? Everybody had like a publisher. Yeah,
I didn't quite understand. How was it? What was the spirit?
Yeah, so how does it change over time, like for you, like the publishing world, like in terms of like not just writing, like actually like publishing your books?
Publishing was a lot more expensive in some ways and time consuming. You had to do the marketing. You have to find a good market, and then you'd have to get your envelope, often 8 by 11. You had to get your stamps. You had to get that all laid out, and then you'd put it in that yellow envelope, and you'd put a self-addressed stamped envelope, and that was different. Today, I can do my research, my marketing online in many different ways. There are many. I just visited Submission Grinder, for example, today, and there are many engines like that. In many ways, it's quicker, and just type something into your browser, you know, the type of genre you're looking for, the type of market. It can save you a lot of time. You also can get lazy that way because you don't want to leave your computer or get up from your chair.
Yeah, of course. So in terms of like, because you've published 250 publications too, do you have any advice for younger authors out there, authors that are like just beginning?
Oh yeah, don't get into it. No, I'm just kidding. It can break your heart, Justin. It can break your heart. I like to kid around a lot.
I love it. I love it.
Have not changed. As I wrote on what I sent you, write. Read. Revise. If you send it out and you get rejected, if you still believe in it, keep sending it out, but get good criticism. It helps if you join a really good and productive writers group like mine, because we meet every 2 weeks, and I'd write a story or a chapter, take it there, and they'd rip it apart. Some people would have good insights, some would off the wall and a waste of time. I sold dozens of stories and several novels just because I was a member of that group. Excellent criticism is worth its weight in gold. Also, go take a creative writing course or two. I took creative writing courses, and then when I became a professor, I designed my own course on how to write science fiction and fantasy.
Wow.
But find a good teacher, one who is critical and who wants to really help you rather than get in your way. So that would be basically those are my suggestions.
Yeah, that's really great advice too, because a lot of people are like, they like think read, like you're gonna start like writing to like publishing, and then all of a sudden you can be like Stephen King or like a Tavy Spencer, you're gonna be like a great author too. But that, like you said, it's not the case too. Like it's changed so much, but we have so much at our fingertips too. Like we're taking like a Zoom class on like writership too. Like you can do it from your house though. You
can do it from your house. One problem today is that so many people self-publish. And so many of them don't know squat, don't proofread what they write, don't get any criticism, don't get any editing. And most writers who have the ability and have paid their dues are often competing with them online. You know, so it can be, what's that title of one of the science fiction novel, Brand New World? Or Brave New World.
Yeah.
It's a not so brave new world in some way. And it leads a lot of people to want to quit. But don't quit. If you're a writer and you have that itch, if you have that vocation, stay with it. Don't get discouraged. Or if you get discouraged, shrug it off and go back to the drawing board.
So have you had the experience of like writing something like maybe like a short story and like looked at it and then you didn't publish it? Like how many books have you like written that you didn't publish?
How many books? I mean, short stories?
Yeah, short stories.
I've been couple hundred books and stories. I should have brought one right here. I just brought my novels, but I recently, some of my stories I've had rejected, and they're rejected again, and I put them away, and then later I see a market beautifully designed for it, and I go back to the drawing board, revise it with the aid of my beta reader. I just sold a short story aimed at young adults called what is it called again? Little Boy Lost. Shows a crying boy, and so. This story is called The Great Gumball Machine. Another story I published about 30 years ago, and about a time in the future when we've destroyed the Earth. And we've got a darn good start in that right now.
Yeah.
And it was called Free Air. And the privileged, the upper class, walked around with a canister in their backs and could take a breath once every 10.8 seconds. Well, I published it 30 years ago for maybe a penny a word. And then I look at the market, Flame Tree Press, and they have an anthology called A Dying Planet. Does that story sound tailor-made for that?
Yep, and it sounds recent too. Like it never changed, you know?
It never changed. So I revised it, sent it to my beta reader. She ripped it to shreds, not quite that bad. And I sent it and I sold it for $300.
Wow.
They're in my closet too. My closet, by the way, has 6 tiers, 6 levels. I'm not kidding. And it's my whole life is in that closet. My whole creative life, pretty much. I've got books in there it would take hours to find. Same with magazines. So I've been published in hundreds of books and magazines, especially magazines. And when I started, some of them weren't very impressive. They practically came off a roller, a mimeograph machine. And now they're perfect bound and glossy. And some of them I'm proud to show, but all of them embody my past. I hope that's a good answer.
Oh, that's great, man. So I like talking about the business side of this too, because you said you like a lot of people wondering where to start selling the books at too. Could you give somebody a little more advice on that too? I know you could say Google and all that too, but Google is a whole vague thing too. It's a big world of its own. So if you could dissect that into something like a search that somebody can look up and maybe find in terms of in terms of your genre and short stories, somebody looking for in your world.
Okay. One thing that's very helpful, I think Robert Heinlein said start at the top and then work your way down. Don't pre-reject your novels. Still, the competition, Justin, can be cutthroat. You're up against the Stephen Kings, the Robert Heinleins. Well, he's gone now, and the competition is terrible. What really gave me a big boost in my career was the independent and small press, because they were willing to consider stories from you, from unknowns, and even to give you input, feedback on them. And so I served a kind of an apprenticeship. It also helps if you're proactive. Now, a lot of writers aren't very good when it comes to marketing and putting themselves out there. They're shy. I've been like that, but I'll give you one example.
Wait, you're shy? I can't tell.
I'm faking it now. I worked myself up to this. Some writers are scared like this, but it's the thing I like to talk about most. There was a series of books called Hot Blood. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's erotic horror. You've heard of erotic horror?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Erotic horror, and they would pay you $200. But for a short story isn't bad. And the added attraction was they would translate your story into half a dozen languages throughout the world. And at this point, this is about 20-some years ago, I still was kind of young. I thought, that sounds good. So I got the phone number of the editor, the guy who ran it, and I called him up out of the blue. He was in California, and I made my pitch. So you've got to be willing to make your pitch. He said, well, what have you published? I mentioned some of the things I've published. He said, okay, send it there. Send it to us. And I did. And I sold a couple stories like that. So one thing, it helps to be proactive. If you can network with other people. One of my friends, I was a kind of a mentor toward him. He came along, great writer. Now the student has outstripped or surpassed the teacher, and he has his own publishing company along with a friend. And because I knew him and networked with him, I have a market for some of my fiction. That's one thing you can do. I've made connections with various publishers online, as well as with various writers, and we try to help each other back and forth. Above all, it helps if you do not give up easily. If you have, I had one short poem that I had rejected 53 times. I asked, would you quit on it?
Nope.
Just personally, would you do it?
I would not.
I mean, I'm not going to get rich if I sell it. But the 54th time I hit pay dirt. You got to pay something like $35, which is pretty good for a poem. For a poem, so I'd recommend. Those are some of my suggestions to would-be writers. You're not going to write a novel and suddenly probably be Stephen King. Not going to happen. You're probably not going to have a bestseller right out of the starting gate. If you did, my first novel would have been published 50 or 60 years ago. But you got to be persistent, and you got to refuse to take no for an answer.
Yeah, that's
but
great.
Still, you got to listen to what people say, what editors say.
Yeah, definitely though. I think it helps to listen to experienced authors too, because a lot of people, like younger people, beginners out there, be like, they didn't know it alls too, especially nowadays. I think a lot of know it alls out there too, but we don't know everything. So
you got to be willing. You got to be willing to listen. Mm-hmm. Recently, I submitted a story to one market. They only paid $50, and they debated about, but then they picked it apart. They said it's awfully good. It's a heroic effort, but they beginning with the first sentence, they showed things that were wrong with it, things that could be improved. It's my habit. I looked at that. I thought they were right. I went back. I tried not to be offended by their superior error, revised it, and submitted it and sold it. For how much? $50 again for another market. That's the kind of attitude you often have to have.
Yeah, so it's like good to take that, like even if it's like BS, like criticism too. Even if it's like somebody that's hating on you just because they don't like, it's just like a negative person. If it's like even if it's from like BS, like constructive criticism too, you gotta take it all. Like
I've heard a lot of bullshit. Yeah, I've heard a lot of BS. And some of them have issues. Like in the writers group, some had an agenda, and they could only build themselves up by tearing you down.
Yeah,
people like that are recognized pretty quickly, though.
Yeah,
usually we want to help each other.
Yeah. So on a positive note, what are you working on now? What do you want to look for the future, like coming up, like recently, like a couple months from now?
I'm so glad you asked.
I'd say it for the end.
There are actually two things, but the one I've started writing a new series. Many years ago, when I had my hair, a word popped into my mind, and I don't want to digress. But one thing that I used to go to a certain Barnes and Noble, and just stroll around, and I would see something, and instantly an idea for a story would leap almost full blown into my head. I saw a book called The Calm Technique, and immediately I had the idea for a story called The Death Technique, about a man who could discompose and seem to be dead at will. I sold it for $300. But to return to your question, sorry I digressed, a word popped into my head that I made up, Dreamfarer, DREAMFARER. F-A-R-E-R. You know, you have seafarer, wayfarer, or somebody who travels in dreams. And this is about a world that 150 years from now, after World War III, has decimated most of the world. And at the age of 32, people have the choice of whether or not to go to dream factories or dream centers to be interfaced in cerebral interface units, where they are given dreams that are tailor-made, designed just for their preferences. If you wanted to be a movie star, you could dream forever about being a movie star. If you want to dream about being a Western hero or a James Bond type of secret agent, you could do that. And so the whole world is like this. War on Earth has largely subsided, although you have spying back and forth. But now countries of the United States, Russia, the Caliphate, and a few others are competing for real estate in space. The war has been dispatched or transmitted into space. But you could sleep and dream at the age of 32. I'm going to ask you, Justin, if you have something you'd like to dream about, you'd like to be this or that type of life, or be this or that type of hero. And they would say, okay, you can do that for the rest of your life. All your fantasies and dreams would come true. Would you be tempted?
I would be.
You would be. But what happens to those who wake up?
The reality.
And find that they can never go back. Some of them adjust, but it's terribly painful. And some of them become what I call wreckers and become filled with a death wish or desire to destroy. And the hero of my novel, Sam Adams, get the symbolism? We had a president named statesman named Sam Adams. Sam Adams wakes up after 7 years and can never go back to sleep. And so I started writing. I wrote one novel, and I got to the end of it, and I won't tell you what happens. And my beta reader said, well, what comes next? She didn't realize the novel was over. She was hooked. So, damn it, I started a new novel called Go East, Young Man. Go East, Young Man. So that's the new world building of sorts that I'm writing about. And since I'm a pantser, I only have a shadowy or incomplete idea of where I'm going. In a way, though, that's part of the thrill.
So, John, thank you for coming on. I love your energy. So I like to end these with like a positive message from you to your audience and the world out there. Anything like to share?
Well, I've thought about this. The pandemic is terrible. A terrible affliction on this country. But there's another affliction. And George Floyd recently was essentially murdered by 4 cops. And this highlighted once again the Black Lives Matter. And for our country, I would like to say that we have a president who doesn't understand it. People who don't understand it, and they will say, well, all lives matter. Well, Black lives matter because in the past and still in the present, they haven't mattered. You know, they haven't mattered much. What this statement says is that Black lives matter too. Black lives matter also. And they are a part of our American tradition. I guess I would say to people, try to be positive, try to give back to society and accept everybody in this country, white, black, brown, the rich and poor, view them as fellow Americans, as part of a large family. I know it's difficult to do. But I see so many fellow Americans with cardboard signs standing on street corners and elsewhere, out of work, homeless. Now and then, put a couple dollars when you drive by, roll down the window, or if it's automatic, just press a button and give them a few dollars and wish the best. Give back to your fellow Americans as much as you can, and stay positive. And above all, don't be so darn quick to judge, because that's such an easy thing to do. Well, I hope I ended on a high note.
Nah, that was great, man. You were awesome. You're awesome. One of my best guests I've had. Open the bell seasons, because you're one of my best guests. So just plug yourself now. Where can people find you? Our website, social media, wherever.
Okay.
Yeah.
I meant to write all those down. My website is www.johnroseman.com. johnroseman.com. I have a media page where you have free interviews with me, radio interviews, video interviews, video reviews of all kinds. I don't think I've ever had a vlog before.
You know how it is, John. We're innovative here. So
yeah, I'm really innovative. You're very good as an interviewer. I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it. Where else? I have Facebook pages. I have a blog. I haven't been relatively inactive lately. It's John Roseman app blog. I can't quite remember, but I have one. I'm on Facebook. I'm on what's the other one? Name the other one.
Blogger, Google Blogger. There's Facebook,
No.
Instagram, Twitter.
Instagram, thank you. Instagram and LinkedIn as well. I'm all over the place. I can't spend a lot of time in all those places because then I'd have no life away from the screen. But my email address, I have two. One is jroseman, JROSEMAN. I'll leave out the end, jroseman@cox.net. If you have any questions, drop me a line, say hello, and I'll be glad to chat with you.
Okay, great. So this is going to be on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. It's going to be all over the net. So just everybody go out support John Rosenman. It's been a great interview. You'll learn some stuff. You'll laugh. You may cry. So thank you, John, for coming on. Thank you guys.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
No problem. This has been the Countless Vlogcast, episode 36 with my guest, author John B. Rosenman. Thank you, John, again.
Thank you, and bye.
All right. Have a good day.
Until next time.